be easier to shape the way you think than in your 20s, which is it's both very profitable and very dangerous because you're easily influenced in the negative. And so having a healthy spiritual community, being immersed in God, develop the kinds of habits. Your habit formation is easier and quicker in your 20s than it is in your 30s, and then it only gets harder in your 40s and 50s and 60s and all that kind of stuff. New habits are really difficult as you're aging. Developing the kind of habits that will shape the person you will be and become are critical in your 20s. This is one of those things.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jacob Sheriff Podcast. We're so happy to be here. My name is Josh, and I'm here with Pastor Jacob and Pastor Hannah, and this is going to be a great conversation. I'm just a little sad that me having this conversation means that maybe I'm no longer a young adult.
We have crossed the threshold where we're going to speak about being a young adult in the past tense.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm surprised every morning when I look in the mirror. I don't look like a young adult anymore. So, well, let's get straight into it. What do you guys remember most about that season of life? Like, what were the struggles you were going through? What were some of the uncertainties you were dealing with? And just kind of maybe give us a recap of what that felt like. If you can remember back that far.
It was so long ago. No, it is interesting how different seasons can almost feel like a lifetime ago. And as I recall that season, it wasn't that long ago, but life has changed so much between that season and the season we're in right now. But man, I think that maybe some of the challenges and just recalling the stories of that season, it was a really neat season. I think I didn't know how much time I had. That's the first thing I kind of think of is maybe the things I see in this side of my season of this tension of time all the time.
You're just an adult now. You're not a young adult anymore, so that threshold.
Well, so, I think especially once you transition into that time where you have kids and they're not like, they're at different stages. Yeah. Their obligations are your obligations. Right. Like there's just a shift.
Other people's things impact your day in so many ways. So where there was this sense of freedom, we didn't know that was freedom until now. There's many other people that you're managing with you every day. Yeah. But one of the other things I could say, and I know we'll get into stories, is the idea of just rhythm of life, like having a rhythm to my life and day. Overall, personality wise, I'm a kind of an organized person, and like order,
it's kind of a core value that we discovered as adults.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of have a core value of order.
Real quick, your bracelet's rubbing against the microphone. So if you guys hear any jangly,
I'm just going to take it off.
There we go.
I'll just decorate my water bottle with it.
Yeah,
so
very pretty.
But I don't know. I'm just thinking about that and what did my rhythms look like? And I think rhythms are so important in this season. So it's more just contrasting. But I'll pass it to someone else and I'll keep thinking about it. So
I'd say kind of there's things that I got right that I'm proud of. There's things I got lucky. And I don't say that in some non-spiritual way. It's just like, I don't know why this good thing happened in my life in that season. So it's not luck in some mystical sense. It's just like, man, I am blessed that this kind of these things accidentally happened. And then there's things that I didn't realize how stupid I was. I as I reflect back, that's a common statement made by older adults, and especially I got lucky that an elderly gentleman came into my life in that time. I've mentioned him numerous times on this podcast. But just like this compassionate empathy to say, like, you think you know a lot, but you don't. So it's going to be okay. You're going to get wiser as you get older. So in that season, for me, I would generically put young adult kind of in this category of your 20s. that can stretch into your 30s. But it's the season of young adulthood, kind of in our context. You would put this season where many of life's major thresholds you cross in that season. So you're in the process of finding and developing a career. That's a major threshold in people's lives. Trying to figure out what you enjoy, what you're good at, what opportunities are even available to you,
right?
And how well can you match your skill set to a job. You don't really have a sense of vocation yet, and so you're in discovery mode. You're trying new things. You're learning so much about yourself that being like a teenager doesn't afford you. A lot of the restrictions of being a child, being a teenager, the early stages of young adult, many of those restrictions start to remove, and you discover who you are without restrictions. Because sometimes the very strict boundaries that things like high school affords you, you feel constricted. You feel like you just want to kind of spread your wings, so to speak. And so there's a lot of things internally. You don't really know who you are because these constrictions, because these lack of freedom. Right. So you get a little bit more freedom.
What was the moment that for you felt that sense of freedom first? Where like, you know what? I'm a grown up now.
Man, I'm trying to think the first time. I mean, I would say high school graduation, but within like three or 4 weeks of high school graduation, one of the most important events in our lives happened, the fire. And that was very transformative. That would be one of the things that, ironically, I would say I got lucky. Like that's something that just kind of happens that you're in the middle of. And now how you relate to it ends up forming the trajectory of your life in ways you could not imagine in that moment. But man, I'd probably say within the first couple weeks of college, when like I know I have to get up, I have to know where I'm supposed to be. I have to be, I get to control whether I go to class or not. And I got to see a lot of like these ingrained habits and mindsets that I didn't know were formulated. Maybe one of the first times was I actually got my first job as a senior in high school. I was lucky, blessed enough to not have to work super early in life. I do odd jobs like in summers and stuff. But I was really focused on education and stuff like that. So the summer in between my junior and senior year, I was away in an educational environment. It wasn't a job. So my first job was as a senior in high school. After basketball practice, I would go and make. Now I don't even remember what they're called beta decks, but I don't even know how to explain what a beta deck is.
Imagine a big box that has magnetic tape in it.
So it's like because I want to say like remember VHS tapes.
Yeah.
And then
the young adults that we're talking to don't even remember.
I was gonna say, so like I don't know how to make this make sense, but basically I would copy for cable networks commercials and get different commercials set on the right tape deck and then mail tape decks off to cable networks.
There wasn't AirDrop back then. There wasn't mobile phones that had the ability to.
You couldn't send this digitally,
right? Like you had to physically.
Digital didn't exist, and like I that's why I'm like I don't even remember enough of the details to make it make sense.
Right.
Anyway, but when I got my first paycheck,
no Dropbox, no Google Drive,
nothing,
no AirDrop,
nothing.
What did we do?
I literally had to mark a beta tape, copy from a computer a 30-second commercial onto this tape. I mean, I don't know how to say it except it's like this giant VHS. Just Google.
Yeah, maybe whoever's editing this in post, pop up a little picture.
Put a beta tape.
Yeah,
on these giant things and like marking. Anyway, that's stupid. So that's pointless. Not relevant to the story. Getting my first paycheck was like, whoa. This is real. Like I'm not doing some odd job for cash. I actually have a real job And then the second moment after like, what a paycheck, was then the details that says what I paid in taxes on that. Then I'm like, oh, this is adulthood, taxes.
Right.
So at that point, I was solidified in my political views about taxation. But that was probably the first threshold, was like, I'm not a child anymore. Yeah, as a teenager, you're pretending to not be a child, but you're a child.
Right.
But I was 17 and got this job. And I even showed up in like a collared shirt for my I had to do an interview. And so I was in slacks and a collared shirt. And I was probably just big old idiot in that. And my boss was gracious. And it was good. It was a good job. I held it till probably about 4 months. And then I got a job at the church doing something similar, but digital instead of beta decks. Right. It was mini betas, having to edit my dad's broadcast and television programs with the church and videos for the church. That was my second job.
Yep. That's cool. Yeah. And I got my first job like around the time that you had that job. And so I hopped in. That's where I first started this whole journey, but we won't digress there. How about you? What was your first, like, I'm an adult moment, like where it felt you realized I'm not a kid anymore?
I think that the college played a part of that. During my senior year, was taking concurrent classes, and there was something about leaving the campus of school and driving, even though it wasn't that far, to a new environment where you were getting coached from the high school end of this is what it's going to look like, this is what you should do, all those things. And then to be walking in the middle of that, it was I would say those were some of those first moments. But then having a job that I had to drive an hour to, which was in Ardmore, that was probably another moment of I have to get up and get myself there, and whatever obstacles may be in the way of that. So I would say the rhythms of school, those boundaries of school, but then whenever you had to choose, not as much of you had to be there or whatever. I had a lot of choices to get myself there, There was still an obligation, but it was like from the inside, not from the outside. It's like, if I don't show up, I won't make any money. Exactly.
I won't be able to eat or whatever.
Yeah. And then many of my other jobs were services to others, like babysitting, cleaning homes, all of those things. But those felt similar, but there wasn't as strict of when and how. And so I think when the boundaries of when and how, that felt more like it was a structure to it, where the other things were like fit in between. So, I mean, if I didn't show up, didn't get paid as well, but it created a little bit different feeling altogether, So
I think for me, after I moved out of mom and dad's house and I had to go and buy silverware, like I had to have my own silverware, and then realize, hey, I'm going to need to like have some food to eat.
There you go.
And can't just make popcorn.
Right. Well, I think I did make a lot of popcorn, but I remember getting like a thing of like Jiffy peanut butter, or maybe, whatever brand, Peter Pan peanut butter, or whatever it was.
It was like name brand too.
Yeah. I'm like, man, I didn't have to get great value.
There you go.
And then like just being in a hurry and not having any skills whatsoever on how to cook anything, and just like getting a spoonful of peanut butter, and that was my breakfast, and just like heading out. Like, I don't know, like that, I just picture little seasons of life like that. I wasn't on my own for super long before getting married, but having to learn how to do my own laundry, having to learn, that if I don't organize my finances and have enough in the bank to pay all of these bills, even though they weren't expensive, like utility bill, trash bill,
still couldn't be ignored.
Having to sort of get my life in order, and it not just being like a report card at the end of 9 weeks. It's like, oh, every single month you got to do this.
Yeah.
And you can't just be like, you know what, I'm tired of it. Like, you have to keep going. You have to keep doing it. I think that is sort of the mental picture I paint of like transition from, high schooler into young adulthood. It's like, oh, I have to be responsible for myself because nobody else is going to be.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning different thresholds that you can go through. So there's sort of that decision-making autonomy.
The way I kind of, there's a author by the name of Ronald Rolheiser, wrote a book, and he talks about 3 major seasons in your life. The first season after childhood, so these 3 adult seasons. The young adult season, which again is not necessarily just like your 20s or even your early 20s. It can be 20s, 30s. Just it's a part of this process of being an adult or human. The first season is the process of getting your life together. Not that it's in a state of like disarray or chaos, but once you get out of the constraints of childhood, and the high structure, the high external structured environments, school, home, you're like freedom is like adventurous and dangerous. So that kind of freedom, like what kinds of constraints what kind of order do you bring to your life? So getting your life in order, getting your life together. The second season is how to give your life away. And then the third, how to give your death away. It's his structure for this. But this season is a process of getting your life together. So you're crossing a couple major thresholds. Most people will cross these thresholds in young adulthood. Kind of in our context, many people will cross these thresholds a lot in their 20s. Sometimes it's in your 30s as well. But you're getting your first job potentially. And you might have 5 jobs, 10 jobs. You might figure out that you have a little bit more of an entrepreneurial drive. And so you don't want to work for somebody else. Not tons of people like go into adulthood going, I want to work for someone, being told what to do, doing the same job for the rest of my life. Very few people do that. So some people, they think they're entrepreneurial and they want to work for themselves, and they realize how hard that is for them with whatever particular interest or skill set they have. And so they decide not to do that. They decide to jump into a career. You're potentially going into higher levels of education. Many people, the world generally just says you have to go to college. And thankfully, I'm seeing a trend that as universities get more and more distorted, that there isn't this one size fits all. Everybody should go to college. There are really good trade schools. What I would say to that threshold is that no matter how formal your education, your learning should never stop.
Right.
That would be one major thing I would say to young adults is don't stop learning. Just because you might not really enjoy the high structure environment, got a lot of family members, got a lot of friends that after high school, the formal education they were just done with. But if your total education stops, then there's no upward mobility in culture, in life, in career, if you don't keep learning. So don't stop learning, because we all, if you went to college, this is one thing I distinctly remember about the first couple years of college, was not college itself. I remember being in classes where someone is coming back to college, but without the kind of self-awareness of what they're there for. They just know they had to come back to college. And so I remember these older, and we're talking people in their like 50s, which they probably were in their 40s, and I thought they were super old. And now that I'm encroaching on 40 thing, I'm like, they must have been in their 50s, maybe 60s. Anyway, and they were like a peer age with the professor. And so they were always like trying to jump the gun on every question. And now I recognize, okay, they knew they wasted a lot of time in school. And so now they're having to go back and they're proving something to themselves. I just didn't enjoy them, but it did make for an easy class because they would just talk with and the professor wouldn't ask us questions. So, but like that, you can't stop learning.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first threshold of some kind of learning, whether it be formal or not. You got to keep learning. And then the second one you started mentioning that was like a major threshold is the process of just what living in the world is like requires some type of responsibilities. Mm-hmm. This really is genuinely like one of our core values. One of our family core values is take responsibility. For whatever reason, both of us got some wiring that's like, other people being responsible for you does not mean you shouldn't be responsible. Mm-hmm. You have to take responsibility. And so you have to take responsibility for getting your bills in order, getting some type of structure to your life. Your income needs to exceed your expenses. So how do you know what you're doing with expenses and what kind of bills are you responsible for? And I remember the first house we bought, which is another one of those major thresholds, is when you have like a major responsibility. Not everybody as a young adult has the experience of buying their first home. Many rent for extended periods of time, but buying our first home that wasn't just a rental was like, I have to go figure out
another threshold.
What electric company even provides the electricity, and we bought it in Texas, and so it's like there's multiple companies that do this. It's not just like one.
Yep. I just like that situation specifically. Like I just got whatever one was sort of assigned, and didn't realize I was overpaying for like 3 years until I can actually go shop around and get like a really cheap.
I had to ask an adult, and they're like, "You need to get a broker." And I'm like, what is a broker? Like, what does the city offer? Mm-hmm. So, okay, water, sewage, trash. Why are these so expensive? And gas, that's another company, and I can set these up on auto pay. It's like all of this is the process of getting your life in order.
Right.
That okay, you've got freedom, great, but freedom for what? There are responsibilities inside this freedom that is going to constrain your life in some way. Right. So bringing order to your life, that's a threshold. Some people get forced into that pretty early. Some people can delay that a little bit. So, a lot of young adults like go through college, and their parents are still able to finance a lot of things. Some of that's like, advantageous. Some of it's a way that some young adults delay responsibility for their life. And that's where as we're raising kids, we've got our oldest are within pretty short years before they're having to cross this threshold. Mm-hmm. So weird to say that. And so like we're having to pray through as parents, okay, how do we start teaching them responsibility? What's going to be right for them? Our oldest, she has a bit of a generic category, probably be entrepreneurial. She has an entrepreneurial drive. So she likes to self-create things. We do sense she has a sense for money. She's a very responsible child, a very driven and motivated child. So, like when it comes to things like college or their formal education, I'm not sure of going straight into college. Some kids, that's good for them. I see some young adults like getting in that kind of environment is just like boundaryless high school. Mm-hmm. You're not serious about your education. You're getting indoctrinated with all sorts of weird stuff, but then you're not developing the kinds of responsibilities that adulthood is supposed to afford you. So they just go wild and crazy. Mm-hmm. And that's why many people go back to school, is because they feel like they wasted. So I kind of feel like, well, maybe for our kids, there'd be some type of like Bible school environment that is a little more responsibility, some formal education, but the space to grow and mature spiritually, to be ready for that other environment. Right. And just any other thresholds would be things like marriage and family. Those are major thresholds. We can go
relationships, like how to to identify it, and
your friend group starts changing. Right. All those things are big thresholds of relationships.
So let's shift gears in the conversation. Maybe let's talk about what common pitfalls there are, or things to be aware of as a young adult that you don't want to like fall prey to. Mm-hmm. I think there's some obvious ones, but they're still worth mentioning, like financial irresponsibility, I think is a big one. Because if you weren't trained, or even if you didn't grow up in a family with financial literacy, discipline, then your tendency will be to just like act like a child, which is to consume and not save or things like that. So I would suggest getting some basic financial literacy training, like learn how to make a budget, learn how to look at your income and then organize your expenses and then plan out what you're going to do. Learn to set money aside, learn to have an emergency fund, learn to do all of this stuff on the front end so that you're not in this place of just like, well, I'm going to open up my app and look at my bank account, and if the number is high enough, I'll buy this thing. When you have that kind of reactive approach, like your money's just going to go away before you even know it, and you're going to end up in trouble. I remember some financial mistakes that I made early on. One of them was without naming names or anything. Basically, we added an additional family member to our phone plan. And this family member was very active at text messaging. And at this time, texting wasn't unlimited. It was 10 cents a pop. And for like the multimedia messages where it was like 25 cents or something. And so I get this phone bill the month after we'd added this individual to our plan, and it was like $1,200. Whoa. And I'm like, that's money that I did not have at the time. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, so that mistake drained our savings that we had been putting back for like a long time. Whoa. And I had to I remember being overwhelmed and calling my mom and being like, I don't know how to do, like, what am I supposed to do? And like, that was part of that. Like, hey, if you'd had the financial literacy to kind of anticipate this and to look at it and to understand that and actually have conversations and things like that. They didn't stay on our phone plan after that. They got their own phone plan so they could deal with their excessive texting.
They could tap into their savings for their phone bill.
That sounds so foreign right now.
Yeah, but isn't that weird? So everything's unlimited now, but at the time it was like, that's how the phone companies made money, is dumb teenagers over texting and like getting
like kids buying,
because you would get the phone bills and they'd be like a novel or like a dictionary that sent back to you. It's like, here's every message you sent or whatever. I mean, that probably sounds crazy to the young adults that are listening right now. They're like, I've had a phone since I was 3. But anyway, that was one mistake. Another one was just like in the process of trying to buy a new house. Like, I was just excited to like get into a house and kind of like do that whole thing. And so we got over eager and looked, we're looking at a house, and we did just sort of a cursory investigation and inspection. And because I was like too nervous about like asking right questions or anything like that, we went ahead and put earnest money down. It was like $1,000. And then whenever we saw the house after it had been cleared out, we're like, oh, wow, there's a lot of issues here. And we ended up having to back out of the deal. And that's another time where I just like, that was school of hard knocks money. I was paying tuition, you know, it's like, and so mistakes like that, they can either be a big setback or you can learn from them. And so my advice to a young adult is not to avoid mistakes at all costs, but because you're going to make mistakes, like whether it's with money or with other things, have that posture of learning. Like you're talking about, like, what did I learn from this? What questions do I need to ask next time so I don't make this blunder? And then be willing to share that advice and that wisdom that you gain with other people, because the more you share, the more it comes. And so anyway, there's a couple little examples of maybe some pitfalls that people fall into. I think maybe another one, and you guys can hop in on this, is like the idea that as long as I go to college and get my degree, everything will sort of sort itself out.
Yeah.
Like that's the promise that was told, like true. For, it's like, oh, you get through high school, you go to college.
Yep.
And then you're going to make $1 million, like whatever that narrative is. It's like, nope. No, you actually have to like do the work,
the effort,
put the effort in to become somebody that somebody wants to hire, and then work hard. And then over time, you'll like the number of young adults, that I just do the whole mental, like, bless your heart kind of thing that just show up in a career. And like they've been there 3 months and I'm like, why am I not the CEO yet? It's like, stop having this entitled mentality that thinks that you should just jump to the front of the line because you're a special little snowflake, Yeah. Maybe I'm being a little harsh on the next generation, but I just see this kind of attitude pop up from time to time. And I'm
the generation in front of us were hard on us like that. Yeah. So we're still millennials. We've developed that kind of reputation. I'd say those two things are pretty dangerous. Being boundaryless and being entitled. Those are two dangerous mindsets that honestly, like you probably most of us have variations of those mindsets. And life has a way of challenging that. And I'd say if you can learn how to evaluate it yourself, self-evaluate, and then learn how to grow from those things, then that's a big deal in your 20s. That learning how the boundaries of home and school, once those are lifted, life is not boundaryless. Mm-hmm. You have boundaries. You have time boundaries. You have emotional boundaries. You have relational boundaries. You have financial boundaries. And if you don't learn how to live with self-imposed boundaries, life will consume you. You'll either become oblivious to all the stupidity that you're engaged in. It could destroy you. It can destroy your finances. Mm-hmm. It can destroy your relationships. The number of young adults I see that sadly before they're 30 have already been divorced, and are working on a second marriage or unmarried. And some of that, not all of it, but some of it comes from not understanding boundaries, not knowing how to communicate boundaries. Every relationship, there's a boundary, and you have to learn how to have those boundaries, communicate those boundaries, and not live boundaryless. That's where sort of stereotypical college, the like party, heavy drinking, drugs, various things like that comes from once the external boundaries are released, you start learning who you are and who you are in this environment. And when this environment has expectations of you, and you don't know how to have self-imposed boundaries, you live boundaryless, it consumes you. You become the kind of person who is controlled by this environment, and it's not good. So if you don't learn self-imposed boundaries on every facet of your life, even relationship, even in marriage, there are boundaries in marriage. They're different than every other relationship, but I've messed up a lot of relationships in my 20s because of not understanding relational boundaries. That there's a point where like, this is not okay. Mm-hmm. And then having a sense of entitlement, man, the world does not owe you anything. I don't know how to communicate that any different. Like you're not owed anything. Right. And I'm not saying that in a sense of the kind of the historical thinking, therefore, because the world doesn't know, you got to go fight for everything and make demands and conquer whatever. I don't mean the opposite. The polar opposite is also not necessarily true, but a sense of entitlement that like working a year, 2 years at a job, not getting a promotion, that's just life. Like that's not, you're not being oppressed because you're not getting a promotion. You don't have to be a victim to that. You, in a work environment, you work hard, you take responsibility, you do a good job, you exceed expectations, you have a good attitude. Just those simple things, like you will be promotable, but like you're not. I see a number of young adults. When we were young adults, I would see a number, like they wouldn't find fulfillment in their job. And like, that's common. That's okay. Some jobs you're never going to find fulfillment. And so, yeah, maybe it is time to move on. Some of it, you're just not smart enough to recognize how to be fulfilled in this environment. And you got to be patient. You have to learn that. You have to grow in it. But being disappointed and quitting a job a year, 2 years in, and if you fill out your resume and every 6 to 12 months you quit a job and get another job, it doesn't say you quit, but your resume shows you how long you worked in all these different workplaces, and the next employer is looking and sees 6 jobs in the course of 2 or 3 years. They're basically going to see you're going to quit me too. And so you don't have endurance. You don't have stamina to work through hardships at work. And that not every day at work is going to feel like you're fulfilling your God-given destiny.
Right.
So getting impatient. Impatience is another pitfall I see as a young adult, is that you think everything you should accomplish by 30. All of us felt that way.
Right.
Oh my goodness. I'm thinking like, I had so many things that was like, I'm going to do this before my parents did this. Right. I'm going to accomplish this before my peers accomplish this. By the time I'm 30, I will have accomplished this and this and this. And here's the deal. You'll probably succeed more than some, and you're not going to succeed as much as others. And YouTube is reminding us all the time that apparently you can be a child and open products and be like a millionaire. And it makes you feel like you're a stinking loser because you're not making $1 million by the time you're 30. Right. Hey, some people do. Right. And it's awesome. And most people don't.
Right. And a lot of people who don't have the wisdom or maturity to know how to handle that whenever it does happen. And so they blow it all on Lamborghinis and whatever.
I want to talk about that, but that's a little bit longer of a conversation. So I will circle back to it, but I want to give you a chance to jump into this.
One thing I've just been thinking about is to develop a thankful heart towards the opportunities in front of you. I think a pitfall could be that, I don't know, you kind of got into it, but not seeing the opportunities in front of us as preparations for other seasons, if you will. That if we could see from a higher perspective, then maybe this isn't the ideal, but maybe if I follow peace and stay in it and be anchored to a heart of thankfulness, that ends up developing in you an adaptability and an ability to be a learner. You touched on that earlier too. I can think about the many things that I did in that season that really, in and of themselves, they seemed insignificant. But if I look back, I'm thankful for this short season of doing insurance at a doctor's office, because now as an adult, a mom, I understand insurance, but in that single thing, it was very annoying or, whatever. So just not overlooking the little things, but staying faithful and staying thankful. And then the other thing, I think a common pitfall that we're all susceptible to, even after young adult life, is leaving like this, a spiritual community, leaving something that is actually life-giving that we may not, again, be thankful for, but a community that is actually anchoring us to something greater than ourselves. I think we can have a tendency to get really selfish in a young adult season, where you get to make your decisions. No one's telling you what to do.
Right. You sort of become the center of your universe. Yeah.
And so I would say to that, as a part of a solution to that, is somehow find a way to connect and serve someone else. Because, and I'm not saying that, day 2 of, adulting, you just must be connected. I'm just saying that is something, I think, if you keep it in the back of your mind, that the world doesn't have to revolve around my needs, my wants, my desires, but you will be a healthier person if you still have an outlook of others, through that season. I'm a mom with lots of kids, And this is not I always wanted in my young adult life to be able to, babysitting was one thing I did. It was just easy for somebody that was nurturing, and I had a lot of siblings, so it wasn't an uncomfortable thing for me. Mm-hmm. But even when I was doing it, I would think about one day I'm going to be the mom that needs the babysitter. So be a good servant to someone, be a good employee to someone, be what you would want, and be able to have that perspective of what later in life that would look like. There's many times where, as I, asked for help or whatever, I remember that I was that for someone at one time. So the seeds you sow in this season have impact on later, just as the scriptures say. So I think that it's important to not let the season become all about you and make you super selfish. Again, I don't want to say what that looks like. I think it's different for everyone, but I think that that's something that is super important in this time. So
yeah, I think you hit on a core temptation of that season, because all of a sudden life becomes very like you're in control of your own destiny all of a sudden. Yeah. So you start to get this perspective of me versus the world, or me versus whatever the situation is. And it can be tempting to slip into this mindset where everything is filtered through, how does this affect me? And
you're at the center of everything. Yeah.
And the pitfall with that is self-centeredness, is you start to make your decisions not based on wisdom or what the word even teaches. You start to make your decisions on what's most expedient. And then you start developing habits. I think that's the other thing, is like
there's
the kind
ripples
of habits
effects to that kind of life.
The kind of habits you tend to develop in that season of life are the kind of things that you'll either have to overcome later, or
you'll have to undo later in life.
If they're bad, you have to undo them later, because they've hurt you and harmed you and set you up to be the kind of person that is not healthy. Or you can choose instead to invest time into developing habits that will set you up for success.
Yeah.
And I wish I had known that. Or maybe I knew it, but I didn't have the self-discipline to implement it as much as I needed to. And so there's, I think a large part of my late 20s, early 30s has been undoing some of the bad habits that I had set up, because, you take restrictions off, and, the path of least resistance sometimes is the one that we take.
Yeah.
Maybe possibly the most important thing in young adulthood, especially 20s, is understanding the process of character formation, because which is also a process of habit formation. Just basic neuroscience is somewhere between 28 and 32, so roughly 30. So 28 and 32, your brain is still maturing up to like 28 to 32. And that just means that the way our brains work is it rewires itself through different experiences, circumstances, learning. There's a process of horizontal development, how much information you learn, how much new information you can gain. And there's something called vertical development. It has to do with capacity. It has to do with perspective and worldview, not what you know, but how you think. And how you think is still very malleable in your 20s. As you get into your 30s, just the way our brains work is your brain becomes less malleable. It's not fixated or calcified, but the process of calcification is happening after 30, which is scary. And for the average person who's not interested in growth, not interested in learning, that is content with just status quo, by the time they are early 30s, 30 to 32, how they think becomes fixated. It becomes permanent. It is how they will think for the rest of their life. And they'll only be seeking self-reinforcement. the exception to that is trauma. Trauma forces us to think about things different or force a different perspective. So even people going back to school in their 30s, 40s, 50s is only horizontal thinking. It's new information. It's not changing the way they think unless there is a traumatic event. And so that's what precipitates some people's new development is some type of traumatic event, an injury, a death, a relational brokenness. That kind of trauma can either destroy a person or it can transform the way they think. And this is why the importance of being led by the Spirit, having a spiritual community, having healthy relationships, accountability, those things can help you navigate trauma in its extreme form. But even the way I had to learn development as an adult is mild doses of trauma, which has to do with discomfort. So your 20s are prime to shape the way you think, and it will never be easier to shape the way you think than in your 20s, which is it's both very profitable and it's very dangerous because you're easily influenced in the negative. And so having a healthy spiritual community, being immersed, I believe, in the Word of God, and develop the kinds of habits. Your habit formation is easier and quicker in your 20s than it is in your 30s, and then it only gets harder in your 40s and 50s and 60s and all that kind of stuff. New habits are really difficult as you're aging. It requires mild forms of trauma. And so developing the kind of habits that will shape the person you will be and become are critical in your 20s. This is one of those things that I feel like I kind of just got lucky. I got blessed that somehow I stumbled on to Dallas Willard and Richard Foster in my mid-20s.
I think part of that is just as you're pursuing the Lord, He brings the right things into
what is
your
it?
life.
When the student is ready, the teacher will emerge.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was ready for Dallas Willard.
Your posture towards life was that of
and that's
of
where
learning.
I was lucky that whether it was taught by my parents, whether it was just a wiring that I had of like a craving for learning. And I thought that was a measure of just wanting to be intelligent. And then the opening paragraph of Richard Foster's book, Celebration of Discipline, kind of messed me up in a good way, where he says, superficiality is the curse of our age. The doctrine of instant satisfaction is a primary spiritual problem. The greatest need today is not for a greater number or a higher number or more that are intelligent people or gifted people, but for deep people. That was 24, 25 when I read that. And like, well, dadgum, I've spent my whole life, definitely my adult life up to that point, working on my intelligence and working on my giftedness, whatever that is, in a spiritual sense or in just a natural talent. I wanted to be more talented. I wanted to be more intelligent. And he said, like, the greatest need today is not for a higher number of intelligent people or gifted people. I'm like, so you're saying the world doesn't need me? Like that was my attitude, but for deep people. And I realized, man, for all that I might know as far as knowledge, I can't say that I'm a deep person. And I did. I felt lucky in that, like, okay, I'm in my mid-20s and I can start working on this. And so that's when I started the journey of spiritual disciplines that added and made my spiritual life that I had a great spiritual heritage. We were in a great church environment, good home. So I was rich in the Word of God and in spiritual community. But this was another level that I knew I could develop and work. And I feel lucky that I was in my mid-20s when I encountered this. So I got kind of an early start on this. If I could get people in their late teens, their early 20s to start some of this and get not serious about it in like a legalistic sense, but just like, this is important. The kinds of disciplines you form in your 20s will be the kinds of disciplines that shape who you are and who you become. And I want who I become to be like good. I want that to be better. The number of things, like you said, that like in my 30s, I'm having to go, how did I turn out like this? Why is this my natural propensity? I developed a habit in my 20s
right.
that I should have watched. I should have been more attentive to. I should have been held accountable to. And so that's where, when you start taking the external boundaries off, you start learning about the person you are. But the person you are today can mature, can grow. What kinds of disciplines do you have in your life, habits that are moving you in the direction of the person you're becoming that you want to be? And I was 29 when I was in my first development program. And that's one of those things I wish I had at like 21. And I am, whenever this episode is being released, I may release a 12-week young adult formation development program.
If you want more information on that, you got to let us know. Leave a comment.
Yeah. To try to get people in their 20s, what I was late 20s, like 29, and then in my 30s working on. But in that first development program, I'm realizing, I'm in that swing of like, my brain will start getting calcified after this. But some of the things I worked on in that program began to shape how I approach my 30s. And I feel like I got a head start from a number of people who are in their 40s doing this. And it's even harder for them in their 40s or 50s. And things like, what are my core values? What are the things that matter the most at the deepest level to me? What is my vision for life? I went through a practice where I developed my eulogy values, and that was in my 30s. Man, if I'd had developed some of those things in my 20s, it would have saved me a lot of heartache. Just like eulogy values are the things that, like, at my funeral, these are the things I want the people closest to me to say about me, because they're not going to talk about achievements at a funeral. We don't talk about people's achievements at their funeral. If we do, it's because we're avoiding talking about their character. They're going to, like, the people closest to you are going to talk about your character. They're going to talk about who you are and your impact on them. What do I want them to say? Because if I died now, what would they say? Well, some of it would be okay. Some of it, I don't think I'd like what they would have to say if they were being honest. So can I shape that, what they will say? Well, I can't manipulate it, but I can become the person who I would want that. And two things that emerged in that time was peace and wisdom. And at 30, I'm solidifying these things. And then I think, man, if I were 22 again, first getting married, what if I had been working on these things then? Now, chances are when you're 21 and 22, you don't know the person you want to become. But starting the process makes all the difference to set the trajectory of your life. And I would say one key thing in your 20s is to see what trajectory your life and your habits are moving toward. Is it self-centeredness? Is it just simply achievement based? Is it healthy community? Is it a person who's going to look more like Jesus in 10 years? Because the thing is, it's just inevitable. You will be 10 years older at some point in time. 10 years from now, you will be 10 years older. You will not be in your 20s for long. It feels forever, but you won't. And then now, as I'm nearing the end of my 30s, I'm thinking, where did that go? Where did my 30s go? And so life is going to keep moving. Are you living it intentionally? Are you living in the direction of fulfilling God's purpose for your life? Even if you can't articulate it, even if you don't have words for it, there's no way I would articulate in my 20s my purpose the way I articulate it now. But did I have a sense of purpose? Do you have a sense of direction for your life, purpose, intention for your life? Getting those things set in your 20s will do far more for you than you think, even if it doesn't turn into a higher paycheck in the next year. Those things set the trajectory for your life in the person you're becoming.
And I think that with what you're saying there, I think a common thing we can partner in a lie to is that we have to have this testimony that we come back from. And I would just say that you don't have to. That if you are listening and you have a hardship testimony, then the love of God is greater. But it's also okay that you don't have a season of hardship testimony or whatever.
You don't have to go make a huge mistake, especially on purpose, to have a testimony.
But I think it's anchored in what you're talking about is a vision bigger than yourself. Something connecting you to something bigger keeps you tethered in those things. And that's okay. It's okay to have those things, that there doesn't have to be, I don't know, some fallout. But also, if you've had that, then it's a great time to find the love of God as well. And I don't mean that just feel good. I mean that the most wonderful adventure, most wonderful journey we could all be on is truly found in Him. Eventually we all get there, but at what time do we choose to get there?
Right.
So
that, like, the prodigal son could have drifted for, years and years more, but he didn't. He chose to return when he did. And whenever somebody makes that decision to return, the Father's there waiting.
Absolutely.
But it also would have been better for him if he'd never left home in the first place.
Exactly.
It's like we learn from both sides of that story.
Yeah.
Like what the Father's heart is towards people.
Never forget the Father's heart in the midst of whatever journey of life you find yourself on.
Right.
Always know that He's waiting.
Right.
So.
Quick note, if you guys are enjoying this conversation and you have not yet subscribed, what are you doing? Tap that subscribe button. Share it with a young adult maybe that you think would benefit from this conversation. So if this has been helpful, go ahead and do that. Well, let's touch on relationships briefly, because we don't have a ton of time in the rest of this episode. But I know that's a core part of this, and it's something that's always on the forefront of young people's minds as well. Of like, how do I know if I'm finding the right person?
Yeah.
Or even romantic relationships specifically is kind of where I'm going. But like, how do I become the kind of person? If they're asking the right questions, they should be asking like, well, how do I become the kind of person that would be a good husband or be a good wife? I think a lot of times it's tempting to try to rush that process. I was 19 when I got married, so I was in a hurry. I'll say it that way. So it may seem a little hypocritical for me to critique that, but that I think is an area of pitfall. A lot of times is they're either rushing into that or they're not sure what to value the most. So what is some wisdom we can share from experience of either, personal stories of personal experiences we've had, or from other situations we're familiar with, of what to watch out for, and then what to be investing their time in to prepare for marriage?
I think what you just hit on, forcing or rushing are big mistakes. And I will say that between family and friends, and then now pastoring, when I see a couple get married really young, so we're talking 18, 19, 20, maybe even 21, it's something that's like they're in a hurry and they're young. 100%, I've seen every single 100% within the first anywhere from year to 4 years. So somewhere in their early 20s have a major either event like something external or a major slump in that marriage that most I've seen, being in a healthy overall spiritual community, can navigate through that. I've seen a number of marriages that didn't make it. And I think what I've observed, it's because at 18, 19, 20, you don't know who you are. You don't know what kinds of aspirations and dreams you really have. And many that I've seen, they get married early because they're just so passionate about each other and love each other. Sometimes it's a physical thing, but sometimes like, okay, they're fine for each other. But then 2-3 years in, somewhere around 20, 21, like there's this, like, I'm unhappy, I'm dissatisfied, I'm discontent. Something happened and it's because these young adults, they don't know who they are. And if they don't know who they are, they don't know who they are together. And so something is forcing them to start asking these questions that they've kind of put off. about who they are, what they desire in life, their dreams and aspirations. And the ones that go carnal, so
that disconnect,
physical health, they're okay, I'm physically unhealthy, and so I'm going to get healthy, and they get in environments of gym and working out and CrossFit, and they start focusing on carnal things. They become a little more self-oriented, and it distances the relationship. Or they pour into like an education. They change their educational track, and now one partner in the relationship is having to kind of go overboard sacrificially so that this other partner can go on this journey of discovering who they are and what they want in this new career. And they might not have been ready for that kind of sacrifice. And so it puts a strain on the relationship, because this is the journey we all go on. We all have this process of getting our life together. Another way of seeing that is our young adult years are the process of leaving home and finding a new home. So we leave home, we leave the structures and constraints of home life and siblings, if you have siblings, and parents and school and all that kind of stuff. And you go out into the wide world. What you desire is home. Well, you left a home, and it's the right thing to do. But you're trying to find home, and home in that sense of a spiritual community, a marriage, an intimate relationship. Some people, I think it's very few, but some people, they're made for being single. Like, they have a grace for being single, but you need intimate relationships in your life. Being the most intimate being a marriage relationship. You're looking for a sense of purpose and stability in life. That's all under this big banner of home. Well, when I've seen people rush from home to home, so that they leave their own home and they get married at a really young age, they're trying to get this sense of home, but they never went on a course of discovery of who they are. And that's what we all do. We all have this course of discovering what matters the most to us. What do we care about? What do we want to live for? Some people delay it just because they're just carnal and self-centered, and so they just want to live it up with freedom. And that's the worst way of spending your freedom, doing whatever you want. That's shaping you into the kind of person that will be self-oriented and a more physically mature child.
Right. And ironically results in less freedom in your life. You end up bound to your own desires and devices, and it's a terrible spot to be stuck in. So those that are like on this journey of relationship, there's some people that, they get married at 18, 19, like y'all were both married at 19. Like, y'all ended up fine. But the journey is different. I have siblings that they married young. There's always 100% some type of season or event that challenges the marriage, and you just don't know if you're going to be able to get through. Having patience, not giving in to selfish desire, not trying to orient your spiritual community or your relationships around self and meeting your own needs, teaches you the kind of discipline to be in a relationship where, yes, your needs get met, but you're living to meet the other person's needs, and both are healthy in the relationship. Right.
And if you can do that at 18, 19, great. Just know that there will be a season that's coming where you're going to get discontent. You're going to start feeling, oh, did I constrain myself too quick? And there's a number of people who are currently divorced that are friends in our past that they just didn't handle that season well. They thought, oh, I don't like this world that I've created of kids and marriage and bills and all that. I want to go live it up and be free because I didn't do that at 18, 19. That it guarantees self-destruction.
And that sense of entitlement kind of comes back. It's like, I owe myself this. I deserve this. No, I completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, even being married young, like Audrey and I had to go through that like discovery phase and went through a season where we were not in a healthy place. Thankfully, by the grace of God, we came out of that and we're in a healthy place and have learned a lot even through that season that we went through. But the temptation to make the marriage all about you, or to make the relationship all about you, is something I think that every marriage has to struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
But when you don't have the emotional or life, you don't have the emotional maturity or just the life experience to anticipate or to kind of know what to do,
to see
when
it
you're
for what it is.
to see it for what it is.
Yeah.
You can fall prey to that struggle and that season and make really dumb choices.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really helpful pitfall to be aware of. Now, that doesn't mean that people shouldn't get married young, or that they if they are in a space where it's like, you're in a good relationship and the time is right, that you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I had waited any longer, Audrey and I would have been messed up in another way. So like we had to get married or sin, I think is kind of where we were at.
And you know what? That's within scriptural boundaries. Just it's better to marry than burn is what Paul says. But again, you have to do it within, and this is where I've wanted to do better with kids, not their kids, 18, 19, wanting to get married, like just saying like, there's a few, I mean, I see some that are that 18, 19, 20, and they're getting on the trajectory or they're really close to being married. And like, I don't have a problem with that. I can see, okay, you two seem fine for each other, but you must know you're going to hit this point and you've got to stay in spiritual community of people that can hold you accountable, because you will make some stupid mistakes. I thankfully I hit my brick wall at 21. We were engaged, and I destroyed our relationship at 21, not married. That by getting married at 22 was in a totally different place. And if I would have been that way,
go check out the episode, The Love Story That Almost Wasn't.
Yes.
There it is.
If you want to hear that story.
Yes. If we were married and I had hit that brick wall, I mean, I would hope that we would have stayed married, but I would have put our marriage in jeopardy.
Yeah. So Hannah, from your perspective, from the female perspective, so what should young women be looking for, or what should they be? Where should their hearts kind of be postured during that season of preparing for marriage?
So in all of my, not very many, but a couple conversations that I know I can recall that I've had with other females around this topic, one of the major things that I feel like that I've just seen it play out over time, when you're looking at qualities in a guy, or you're just even trying to really see the whole thing for what it is. One of the major things, and we've touched on it today, is someone that is teachable, because there's something about all the different journeys we're going to encounter as we walk out this life that if we kind of have I have it all together, or I'm unwilling to learn, I feel like it's a huge, it's something hard to overcome. And so that is one thing I would just say is, as you're looking at who you want to spend your life with, are they willing to be a learner of life? And I'm saying that even to the female as well. Do we approach life with our heart really open to what God would say or do? And that's going to always be what I will push is, man, when we're connected to the Lord, when we're connected in that, and you know what, don't condemn yourself, whatever that looks like currently, but get on a path of what is he saying and what is he doing. I feel like that when we can take that posture of a teachable heart, then it's not going to keep us from ever finding ourselves in mistakes, but we can overcome a lot, not even faster, because it's not a time thing, but we come back through. We continue to walk forward. So I feel like find the person that's willing to walk through things with you. Don't go find the person that is perfect now and you think is going to remain perfect forever. You're going to hit challenges.
Be looking forever.
Yeah, you're going to be looking forever. So go in those relationships, find the person that can walk through challenges with you. Find the person that, and I know that that's there because God place that desire in us. And so those would be some of the things just on the front end of relationships where it's not already engaged and married young and all of those things, because we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that we're going to encounter issues or problems. But when we encounter those, what is our response, and how are we going to do that? Choose to do that with someone that you can see will do that with you. One of the things Jacob and I say, because we did go through different relational things, is we're on the same team. But even in marriage, we have to make sure it's not always just being on the same team, because then we're occupying the same space, making sure everybody's good. But we have to be lovers as well. So in that, I think just being able to see that for what it is and not going into blindly relationships thinking that it's not going to come with challenges. And then what is your own approach to challenges, and what is the person that you're interested in's approach to challenges?
Right.
And then being able to have hard conversations and keep the communication open to those seasons where one is going to possibly sacrifice more than the other. And can we navigate that through conversation and through connectiveness in other ways? I feel like those are all very important, because there's something really neat that can get established in a young adult season where it's just you in this relationship, or you and a new husband or wife, that will then set you, something strong can be built on top of that foundation. If you have those things in the beginning, then, variables of children or variables of jobs or variables of moves and all the different things that come, your foundation won't have to shake, certainly connected to the spiritual community and stuff as well. But those would just be some of the overarching things that I can think of that are super valuable whenever you're navigating that season. And so the communities you belong to now and the communities that you put yourselves in, pay attention to those kinds of things, because we're fooling ourselves if we think we won't encounter challenges.
Right.
So
I think one of the to kind of build off of what you said a little bit, and I think this applies for both men and women, is to go into a relationship or a marriage expecting that the other person is only going to be the one who changes and not you.
There you go.
Is just completely naive. Like
being
married is to agree to change over time. The amount of impact that Audrey has had on me, I am not the same person that I was when I got married. I've had the same amount of impact on her. She's not the same person. There's core parts of who we are that don't change. But there is so much that can change over time. Like we're in a different season of life. We're parents. We're we're partnered together in purpose and in ministry in ways that we weren't before. Just there's so much that can change. And you have to be willing to continually put yourself on the altar as that living sacrifice, and be willing to change, both, in that process of transformation that we always talk about, to be more and more like Jesus, but also in that, I'm going to sacrifice because I love this person. I'm going to put my needs behind and put them on the back shelf, back burner, whatever. I keep mixing phrases and whatever they are, but to
there's
be willing,
different versions of ourselves that we actually encounter in these different seasons of life. And is that person going to, we can't know everything, so that's not what it is, but can we at least call it out and say it? Jacob spoke of the challenges of his when he was 21, but some of my challenges came a little bit later in life after kids, or after that process. And his faithful love in that season meant more to me than maybe it did when I was 19, And so we're full. Very, very much agree with what you're saying, is there's different versions of ourselves that we don't know how we're going to change in some ways. And so being able to navigate those changes together.
So don't expect to go out there and find this perfect match, or to type your details into some app and get this magic compatibility thing. There are basic compatibility personality things, but if you're willing to change, and you're willing to love somebody in a way that is sacrificial, over time, like, you will learn what it takes to love the other person and to be loved by the other person.
That's good.
So, well, I think we do need to wrap it up. Unfortunately, this is a good one though. So if you really think it was good, like I think it was good, tap that subscribe button or share this, leave us a review or comment or anything to let us know you're listening. If you are a young adult and this kind of content was what you needed, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to know that this resonated with you and that you found this helpful and valuable. So that's it. That's the end of this episode. We'll see you on the next one.